Takes a minute.
Ask them what their favorite emoji is.
Well, that's actually a good one. Welcome, everyone. Come on in. We're excited to have you all here for our AMA with Janelle. As always, we'll take a couple minutes as people trickle in, so feel free to answer our poll. One food must go. Which would you pick? I can get it up here on the screen. And also in the chat, tell us where you're calling in from.
Wow, this is a tough choice.
I know, I was having fun finding a good icebreaker question. Welcome, Sally from Charlotte. I'm calling in from a cloudy Boston. Oh, I do love the Rocky Mountains, Emily. I'm sure it's a gorgeous view. Welcome in, everyone. Tell us what food must go and where you're calling in from. We'll get started in just a couple minutes. Glad to see pizza is not being picked off this list. It's by far one of the top.
Pizza is precious.
Yes, exactly. Although now with pineapple, I don't know if we have any pineapple topping lovers. I'm very out on that. I'm a classic pep. Awesome. Getting some more people trickling in. We'll start in probably just one more minute. Keep letting us know where you're calling in from. Love to see people from all over the country and the world. So give it one more minute.
Okay.
Give people the chance to grab water, coffee, whatever they're drinking, depending on their time zone.
Yeah, lots of U.S. representation here.
Yes, all over.
Oh, yeah. Oh, hi, Dave from Porto.
Awesome. I think we will get started and let people continue to trickle in. Welcome to our AMA with Janelle. If you haven't joined us before for Rally AMA, a little about how they go. We like to keep them really casual, collaborative, just a conversation. We do have some questions prepared, but we want to prioritize your questions, both those submitted before and during the event. So definitely drop questions in the chat and we will do our best to catch them. Also, as always, we will record this session, share it after, and share a recap in a couple days with some highlights. Before I turn the time over to Janelle really quickly, just wanted to introduce myself. I'm Lauren from Rally. I'm the content marketing manager and run these events. Quick little bit about Rally. We're building a user research CRM to help organizations streamline and automate participant management and recruitment and get access to their own users for research. Definitely check it out later, but just wanted to intro myself really quick. And with that, excited to turn the time over to Janelle to introduce herself really quickly and share why we have her here today.
Yeah, thanks, Lauren. Yeah, I'm just going to talk for a couple minutes, just set it up, and then I guess we've got lots of questions to run through. So, hi, everyone. I'm Janelle Ward. I'm going to talk today about my experience through the lens of an article I recently wrote that's called The Confrontations of Flying Solo. You can find it on Medium. Lauren's pulled it up there. Thanks, Lauren. So I'm going to I just briefly want to talk about what I mentioned in the article. Nothing long. You can all check it out yourselves later if you haven't yet. But the key message that I want to start with today is that my journey through solopreneurship, through working on my own, is really a work in progress. So I want to be really transparent here. I have not figured everything out. I'm still definitely in that process. I'm really happy that I've come to the point where I was able to have the courage to write this article and put myself out there. Building in public, that's something maybe we'll talk about a bit later, but that's really something that I want to do. It's authentic to me. So this was kind of the first step. So I will answer the questions. I will talk about my journey, but I'm not sitting here kind of, smoking a cigar and talking about how successful I am. That's not what I want to do today. And then one other thing I just want to clarify is this term solopreneur that we're using. So there's a lot of terms like this out there. Another one that I've played with using is coach-sultant, which is, coach and consultant combined. So everyone doesn't agree on what they mean, but I just want to clarify why I've chosen that term for what I'm doing. So a solopreneur is someone who doesn't have colleagues, who runs a business by themselves for the most part. Maybe there could be some support tasks that you outsource. I'm not doing that currently myself, but you're really doing your own thing. And another part of solopreneurship that's more kind of something I'm aiming for in the future is that I want to build services, systems that kind of grow beyond my personal effort. And I think the clearest example I can think of for that is writing a book, right? You spend a lot of time writing a book and then you put it out there. And if it does well, you can, again, sit in your chair and, smoke a cigar and laugh about your success. But yeah, your work is done. You're not constantly, let's say, billing hourly and having to make your money like that. And then another thing related to that is the idea of pricing. So the general approach to pricing is not hourly, you're pricing for value. So you're selling things at a fixed price and you're not necessarily taking a freelance contract where it's like 6 months, 40 hours a week, 20 hours a week, something like that. So that is kind of the key reason I use that term. And then just briefly about the article before Lauren starts peppering me with questions. So what that article is talking about is really my journey from, first academic research into UX research, but into solopreneurship and kind of emphasizing some challenges and realizations I've had in my first 2 years. That's how long I've been doing this. The things that I talk about are how I'm kind of reframing my understanding of what research is and the role it plays in business. And I also talk about my relationship with sales, how I've kind of loathed sales my whole life. And I give a couple examples from my childhood and from my, let's say, young adulthood as to why that is. And what I talk about there in terms of the research is that I think the gist of it is that coming from UX research, from user research, I thought that that would be enough for me to kind of understand my clients, understand what problems they're having and what I can do to help them. And then just magically, they're going to start paying for everything the way that I price it. And I realize that it's much more complicated than that. Feels pretty obvious to me in retrospect. But to kind of make that more complicated, if you bring in the fact that I was actively avoiding the sales aspect, it kind of, made things challenging for me. And it's taken me some time to articulate that in the way that I do in the article. And in the end of the article, I give myself a little break and talk about this economic downturn that we've all been living through. I didn't know that that was going to happen. Obviously, it happened just as I started working on my own. There's a graph in the article, and it's actually kind of comical to see like the moment I started and then the graph goes down. So that was unfortunate, but I will say that this article wouldn't exist if everything had been perfect. I've had people tell me, if you start a company in a booming economy and everything just goes great, you don't really get a lot of time for self-reflection. Maybe you just think you're brilliant and you did everything right and you don't need to learn. That has definitely not been my experience. I have learned so much in the last 2 years. So yeah, the economy hasn't been great, but it's been a chance to really reflect on, what I'm bringing to the table. So I think that's a good enough summary, Lauren. It's a long article, but I hope you'll all have a look at it, and I'm happy to answer questions now.
Amazing. Yes. And the article is excellent. I definitely recommend reading it. It is not too long, to push back on you, Janelle, a little. It's definitely an easy read and super insightful. Like you said, it's really great reflection, and not everyone puts the time or has the time to reflect. So I know many people know you and know your background, but I'd love quickly to get a little more context into your background, how you got into the field of user research. I know in your article you talk about how much you love research, so I would love to hear a little bit of that.
Yeah, sure. So I started my career, a long part of my career was in academic research. I'm in the Netherlands, by the way. I moved to the Netherlands as a young adult. I did my master's, I did my PhD, and then I just kind of found myself in this path of academic research. And I was there for, it was about 15 years total, 10 years as an assistant professor. And I just found myself kind of more and more often pausing and thinking, is this what you're going to do with your life? Is this really it? And at one point, I had a big birthday and I realized, no, I have to make the leap. I have to do something different. I don't want to regret this. I don't want to stay in a career that I'm not really completely satisfied with my whole life. So, I started to look around. I mean, I think, we might get into this a bit later, but I think the two things that kind of, pulled me out of the academic world were the speed of things. It was quite slow. Everything took a really long time. Like this article, I could just, put it up. It was me that was, making it take longer to get out. So publishing was really slow. And I also missed the sort of actionable insight thing that we always talk about in the user research world. What are we actually doing with the stuff we're discovering, these insights we have, besides going to a conference, having a great discussion, and then going home? So that's really what I was looking for, and I found that in the field of UX research. That's pretty much how I ended up there, working in-house for a few years before I made this leap.
Awesome. And I know that's a huge topic. There's lots of people that come from academic into corporate and in-house. I know this isn't the topic of the same thing, but I really want to quickly ask, what do you feel like was the hardest thing with that transition, or what advice quickly do you have for folks that are looking to transition and find success moving out of academic research? To put you quickly on the spot.
Yeah. I've talked to a lot of academics over the years. I think the hardest thing, and it's definitely for academics, but for anyone who's doing a career transition, is kind of trying to step back and reevaluate their skills for a new environment. If your field disappeared overnight, how would you remake yourself? What kind of strengths do you bring to the table? What kind of skills do you have? So for me, it actually wasn't such a challenge to transition. I think because I'd waited so long and it was my choice. I think it would be much harder if I was pushed out. But yeah, I think for me, the thing that really helped, that I'm still doing now even, is kind of reframing what I'm doing. I taught for years and years and years. And I think teaching is a huge part of a researcher's job. It doesn't have to be teacher to students. It can also be researcher to person far up the corporate ladder, right? It can be a completely different relationship, but that sort of teaching skill is valuable in, I think, any role, not just going from academic to UX research.
Totally. And I love talking to folks in user research who have transitioned from different careers, because it is cool to see how they pull what their skills and their experiences into research, because you really can still keep a lot of the things you've learned, and you don't have to shed all the things of your previous career for a new one, which is really cool and interesting. But speaking of transitions, your third transition, what kind of motivated you to transition from in-house to flying solo? I know many people probably have similar reasons, but curious to hear yours.
Yeah, well, I loved my work in-house. I loved being a manager. That was something I really enjoyed. Again, it was something that I recognized from all my academic years of supervising and leading big coursework and stuff like that, big undergraduate courses, for example. But I will say, the first thing that comes to my mind when I hear that is, I didn't get a lot of freedom with time, and I'm an introvert, and I don't do well being on meetings all day long. And of course, that is a huge part of the job. When you're leading research, you're connecting the organization, and it's great when people get excited about what you're doing and what you're bringing. But then, I would feel myself sort of screaming no when someone would say, oh, let's put a biweekly on our calendars. And I wanted to, but I thought I have no more time. I have no more time. And I had all these big substantive ideas about what I wanted to do in my work. And I think that comes from the academic background too. But I would kind of find myself just like slamming my laptop closed at the end of the day. Like, that's it. I can't do this anymore. I'm full. I need to decompress. And then I would just be frustrated because although I was doing my job and that was part of my job, I couldn't make time for those other things and that kind of that thinking and that pondering and that writing that I really, really missed. And I think that has definitely been something that I've been able to do now because my time is very much more my own now.
Sure. No, I mean, hearing that sounds super appealing. I know we're all on lots of meetings and that can really like hinder your creativity and the things you want to do. Moving into kind of what you've experienced while being a solopreneur, you talk about in your article how research is a much broader spectrum than you were exposed to in-house, and how kind of leaving like that corporate world has just kind of opened the doors to, there's a lot more to it. So I'd love to kind of hear how you've reframed your relationship with research since becoming a solopreneur and kind of some of those things you've realized about the broadness of research.
Sure. Well, I think, I feel like I've been in a giant reframe for the last 6 years. So it's familiar to me at this point. I think going from academic to user research, it was like, this is so great. I get to focus on this group of users, and that's now my research topic, and I'm advocating for them, and I'm waving the user flag in this company, and that's what I'm doing there. And I think even when I was still in-house, it was like, that was fascinating. And I loved doing that research, but I very quickly realized the kind of turning around and looking into the organization. Oh, well, it doesn't matter how perfect this research is and how well it was conducted if it isn't landing and no one cares and everyone's pushing back. And so I think that was kind of another reason that I have become more fascinated with this whole organizational dynamics aspect of things, where I realized, yeah, I'm a researcher, but actually, what is my job? I mean, in my first role, I remember joking with a colleague that we should get 2 salaries, one for research and one for change management, because we were doing both of these jobs simultaneously. So I think researching your organization, not even yet looking at the users or customers, is a part of that. And then, now that I've gone out on my own and I realize everything that's going to happen for this business, I have to do, at least for now. I'm responsible for all of it. And in theory that, a company has all these parts. And even if you're a startup with one founder or two co-founders, you're going to have to either, make peace with not being able to do something, or, learn about how to do it. And I think that's what I talk about in the article, is realizing, for example, we preach a lot, like we need to understand the problem space. We need to understand, I've been doing that myself the last 2 years. We need to really deeply understand what problem we're trying to solve and understand our users. But that isn't enough. That's kind of what I've realized. And I talk about in the article how I did all this research on my client bases, and really talk to people and can really go in depth on what their challenges are and everything. But at the end of the day, it's like that conversation ends, and now I'm going to sell something. Well, do I know? Do they want to buy it? First of all, they might be really interested in our conversation, but are they willing to buy it? Can they buy it? And I think that's, for me, it was a huge challenge with the economy kind of crashing. A lot of the people who were interested when I was first getting started suddenly had no budget. The budget for one researcher was gone. They didn't have it anymore. And I hadn't really anticipated that. And, I talk about my coaching, how I did a lot of pilot coaching. People were very excited, wrote glowing testimonials. But, it doesn't just go from, this was great content that I got for free, to the whole world banging down your door to pay the prices you've set and, fill your coaching roster. So it's like I was just kind of skipping the part that was hard for me, but that is also research. I just reposted someone the other day on LinkedIn and said sort of provocatively, is sales the only research we need? Because at the end of the day, if people aren't going to buy what you're selling, you're not going to make any money. And at some point, you're going to have to do something else, because that's kind of the bottom line. And it was very easy to ignore the bottom line when I was in-house, and I could just say, I'm here to represent the users. You need to better understand the users and build what the users need, because I didn't have to worry about selling the product. It wasn't my responsibility.
Totally. Sales. You brought up sales, which I know many people want to know, because that is a tough part of being a solopreneur or even a freelancer, is having to, like you said, sell your product, sell yourself. And not everyone likes that. So I'd love to hear, and then we have a question in the chat about this too, but what strategies you've kind of found effective for balancing that need for sales, but also your passion for research. Like, you care deeply about the product you're offering, but you also have to spend some time on selling it. So I'd love to hear more about that.
Well, I think the first step isn't even selling, it's even bringing up the money conversation with people. And that's where I would always feel like I'm having this great conversation with someone, and then the moment it comes to the point where I could say, oh, maybe I could help you with that, it's just, the voices are screaming in my head, I don't want to go there, I don't want to go there. So I've started to tackle that lately much better, I think, by actually just saying, this is what I want to talk to you about, and let's hear, let's get an idea of what you would actually have available, right? I mean, just hypothetically, I'm not asking you, but just sort of maybe better understand sort of the situation that people are in. I think another reframe with the sales is that, and I've been talking to salespeople too more often. I say in the article, I'm sorry for ever saying, I don't want to go there. Sales, dirty word. No, sales is absolutely essential. So now I'm humbling myself before all the salespeople. But sales is research too. I mean, your salespeople, they can't just come in and, I mean, if they do it, it's probably not going to go very far. But you're understanding the problem. You're understanding how you can actually help them. So you have to ask the right questions to get there. So I think because I love research and loathe sales, if I can reframe in my mind, this is part of the research process, that's really helping as well.
Totally. I want to pull up this question. It's sales and other things, but I'd love to hear you talking about the sales aspect, which you can dive more into that, but how to identify potential clients and how to approach them in a way that increases the chances of it leading to collaboration. Love to hear your thoughts there.
Yeah. So I think for me, I mean, so the direct approach has been a challenge, and I'm still working on improving that. But the thing that has really worked for me, and actually is my dream that someday it will be like this, and I've been assured that it will someday be like this if it all goes well, is that I put myself out there a lot. On LinkedIn, I'm posting a lot. I've grown my network a lot there, and I post I post things that, I'm often asking people questions because I'm really curious what they think. It's something that I'm wondering about myself. That I think LinkedIn has been absolutely huge in sort of finding people who want to collaborate with me, because they're starting to understand how I think. And so if I write an article, I post it there. I've also done, conference talks and workshops, so I get my name out that way. I think, how do I approach them? Well, in this case, it's more they're coming to me because I'm putting myself out there. I have a newsletter as well. So people then, sometimes will say, hey, this was really interesting to me. Can we talk? And sometimes those talks aren't necessarily, this isn't going to be a client. This isn't going to be someone who's going to pay me, but it's someone who is really interested in a particular element of my work. And then we talk and I grow my network. And, there's all these cool stories about, networking and this just crazy link from 2 or 3 years ago. And then so-and-so knew so-and-so, and now this opportunity has come up. So I think because I'm avoiding the sales and I can't give you kind of a play-by-play of this is how it will lead to collaboration, I think that's what I've been good at is connecting with people and doing it genuinely, because I really want to hear what they have to say and have a discussion with them. And then once my offerings also can, will become more clear, then we can find that moment for collaboration. But I think putting yourself out there, maybe I just read an article on Medium the other day that was like, stop posting if you want to be a successful solopreneur, because you're just wasting your time. And I can definitely relate. I mean, I love writing. So, hey, let me write an article instead of, trying to find some new clients, because I'm much more comfortable in this space. It does, it can help, and it has worked for me. But I know I need to do more of the sort of more direct approach as well.
Yeah, I want to quickly share, and you mentioned this in your article, but this great comment from Doug, how thinking of sales as genuinely helping people solve their problems versus trying to buy things is an important mindset shift. And I think that's totally true. And one thing I'm curious to get your thoughts on. So I know we have folks in the audience that may not be solopreneurs or may still be in-house or plan to be in-house for a long time. And I still feel like the insights you've shared and kind of this mindset around sales is helpful to them, because even though they're not selling an individual product, like they're still selling research within their org. So I'm curious to see if you, like, any thoughts you have on that aspect of the importance of kind of learning about sales for in-house, for advocating for research, advocating for the impact. Curious if you have any thoughts there.
Yeah, that's a good one. It's funny because I've actually thought about, maybe I should just get a sales job and learn these skills. And the funny thing is, at this point, I think I would be pretty good at it, because the real challenge for me when I'm working on my own is I'm selling myself, right? I'm not selling a product that I can tell you about how excited I am about this and how it can help. And then there's a distance. It's me. And so I think that's actually been, the hardest thing, is selling myself. But being in-house, you're right, it is also selling research. And I think another thing it's selling that is closer to the personal is selling your mindset, selling your approach to making decisions and collaborating. I mean, it isn't just about, hey, there's this insight, try to get them to incorporate it. So I think it's the same thing. You're really right about that, Lauren. It's like, how do I understand my stakeholders, their perspective, where they're coming from, and then help them see, can this insight help them solve their problem? Or can this process, can this sort of research mindset and approaching things as a researcher help them with that process? So I think it's actually, I mean, I know we might talk about later people who are interested in going out on their own, but I think that's a great thing to think about deliberately and practice when you're in-house. But realize if you go out on your own, you're selling yourself. And that is, I think, the hardest thing to sell if you don't like sales, especially. Totally.
But I do love your advice too on just posting and sharing. Like, I think people really easily discredit their own insight. And I do the same. Like, we all have really awesome experiences. We all are learning every day. And you just have to be like, start sharing that more. And like, hey, here's my thoughts. And I know, like, especially LinkedIn, everyone's doing that. It can feel so like, oh, like I can never do what these people are doing, like posting their insights and experience. But I really like that advice. Like, I think that's a really easy way to just like share yourself and what you can bring to someone. So I really love that you brought that up. Awesome. I'd love to keep going. You talk about in your article assumptions and how you came in with assumptions. And I think we all have assumptions. Research is there to dispel assumptions. So I'd love to hear kind of how your understanding of assumptions has evolved through your journey as a solopreneur, and maybe some of those assumptions that you've had that have now changed.
Yeah, I think the example I gave in the article is, I mean, that word was a big word when I was in-house, right? And it was like, oh, everybody just wants to go as fast as possible, and they want to just push this out, and I have to slow them down and ask them to challenge their assumptions and think about what kind of research we could bring in to really kind of back some of these with, data from our users. And then, I mean, I touched on this a little bit already, but I made the assumption that that approach would be enough to go all the way to the end to sell a service, for example. So I think that's really, been the biggest one, is just realizing, even though I have an expertise, anyone who has an expertise, when you go out on your own, there's a lot of gaps. There's no way that you have all these skills when you start out on your own, and suddenly you're doing it all. So I think, yeah, it was maybe, I don't think I assumed everything would go very well. I do think I was like a little bit too optimistic in retrospect. But I've never really been someone who's like, oh, I'm gonna just make, tons of money and be super successful right off the bat. But I think I was, because things were going very well at the time. I mean, the market was good. I had a lot of interest. I decided not to go in house. I could have gone in house at that point. And yeah, I just thought, oh, well, things will stay the same. So I think that ties into what I talk about at the end of the article is, even if you think you've covered all your bases, things can change. You aren't in control of everything, like the economy. You don't know what might change. I was listening to a podcast the other day where they were talking about just because something fails now doesn't mean it will fail in another time and place and moment. It could just have been that moment. It doesn't mean, oh, it failed here and now it won't work. So yeah, I think it's just a lot of humbling, and also just realizing like it's tough to do this stuff all on your own. You think, no wonder there's so many people working at these companies. There's a lot of work to do. It's hard for one person to do all of this.
Totally. And it's refreshing to hear that, because I think you see those LinkedIn posts that are like, how I made 10K in 1 month freelancing. You're like, oh my gosh, how are they doing that? And then you try it and you're like, wait, where's all this money? Like, where's the money? How am I not making this much? And so I think it's refreshing to also have you kind of frame it as well as a chance to learn, a chance to grow. Mm-hmm. Like, you're getting this opportunity to expand your skill set in ways you probably never would have in-house, like sales and different things, and having this time to reflect. And I think that can sometimes be a little disappointing because you want it to be successful immediately. But I like that way of thinking of like, hey, I think to quote you, in the world of solopreneurship, iteration and reinvention are constants, not just for the services you offer, but for yourself as a professional and a human being, which, like, wow, mic drop. Like, and I think that's true, not just for solopreneurs, but also it's a great way to tackle your career in-house as well. Of like, you always need to be iterating, always reinventing. And I think that's really true for the field of user research too. Like, we've seen tons of changes and lots of curveballs thrown at user research. And you kind of do have to be willing to iterate and change and take a look like, okay, what's working, what wasn't, and how do we move forward? For sure.
No, definitely.
We have a great question from Tracy talking about one of your assumptions. So she brings up the example you shared of like product managers wanting to build at top speed. How have you tackled this as a solopreneur now? And are you able to avoid it? So curious your thoughts there.
Yeah, so if I can evaluate myself for the past 2 years, I don't think there's been any problem with me building at top speed. That is definitely not the problem. I think the issue is more, my newsletter is called The Problem Space. I love to sit in the problem space and read and ponder and write and ask questions and discuss. And for me, that has been a big challenge to actually build something. No surprise, coming from someone who's been a researcher her whole life. So that is something I'm still dealing with. I mean, there are days where I'm like, okay, today I'm going to make a prototype and send it out to 5 people. And then at the end of the day, I'm like, yo, I'm so glad I got that article written that I've really wanted to write. So I still avoid this stuff. And yeah, it's like finding accountability, pushing yourself to do that. I think that is my problem. So I am the opposite of wanting to build at top speed. Still, that's something that I need to improve on. So if anything, I think the relationship is, I see that side, that if that person is in me somewhere, that they need to come out a little bit more and say, get it out there. You have to keep doing this. You can't keep thinking about this and writing about this. It's just something you have to do.
Awesome. Thanks, Tracy, for the question. We have a question here that I want to bring up and talked about how there are some challenges to solopreneurship and there's some things that are uncomfortable. Larry, I don't know if he's with us live, but he submitted this question. How long did it take you to get comfortable with solopreneurship? Are you still getting comfortable with it? And kind of any advice you have for folks that are a little apprehensive toward that.
Yeah, I think I'm not comfortable yet. I mean, I am. There are things I'm really comfortable with. So I work from home. I do my own thing. I set up my day. Sometimes I go to the bouldering hall and I climb some walls and then I work for a few hours there. I walk my dog. I mean, I really love having the time as my own. I love saying, these are the hours that I have available for meetings, and then people can book in during that time. And of course, like things come up where I'm meeting people at other times, but I really have a lot more control over my schedule. So that I'm very comfortable with. The things that we've been discussing today that I mean, the moment we're talking right now, I've written an article about this. It was very scary to write the article and to even put a first post on LinkedIn to be like, hey, I'm not super successful. if that's the impression that you're getting, I'm still working on this. This is still a process. It was really challenging to write the article. So I think I've moved through that fear state, at least that I'm now standing here, discussing this with all of you. So I think I'm on my way, but it's definitely a work in progress. I do really enjoy though the challenge, and I like it. I'm not saying I would never go back in house. That of course, you never know what the future holds, but I really do enjoy, just like this perspective and really getting to sort of take this bird's eye view on, the industry and the tech world and look at things from this perspective. So in that case, I do really like it and I'm comfortable.
Totally. Amazing. We have a lot of questions about, which makes sense, about the market. So is the market good for solo research right now? There's a lot of impressions that it's not. Also this one from Emily, what is your strategy for the current shifting crappy market? Wait it out. And I also, from your article, know that you jumped into solopreneurship right before those tech layoffs. So what's your advice here? I know that's tough questions, but I'm curious your take.
Yeah. I mean, I would definitely say if you can, and I mean, the researchers that I coach who are like miserable in their jobs, and a lot of times we're just doing damage control, I would say, hold on, unless you have another plan and you can make it financially. It is tough. It seems lately, I mean, at least, or maybe people are just really wanting to be more optimistic on LinkedIn, but I'm hearing little murmurs of things starting to move again. But no, the market is not good. The market has not been good the entire time I've been doing this. And to be honest, I have applied for jobs that I have not gotten. So that has changed for me as well. I had a couple offers before I went out on my own, and I thought, oh, I'll just take a job in-house if this doesn't work out. That hasn't happened either. So I know I've read a lot of very sad, scary stories on LinkedIn about people who are in a lot of financial trouble. So I would say, find a good coach, and really try to mentally and emotionally distance yourself from your work if it's hard, because of course burning out isn't going to help. Then you're not in shape to even make a move. And I know when you're already in a tough position in-house, it can be very hard to even gather the energy to be applying and imagine making another move. And going out on your own is a whole other level of having to do everything, setting up everything. I mean, I spent months just setting stuff up, and now of course I need to redo it all because I'm sort of constantly iterating what I want to do. So it's definitely not a break to go out on your own. I think I'm waiting it out. Everyone in 2023 was like 2024, and now everyone's saying 2025. So I just kind of joke and say, have faith in capitalism. It will all come back. And I mean, I think it's also just figuring out how you're going to decide what is success for you. And if it's just about making the money, then this is not a good time to go out on your own. But if it's about learning and growing yourself as a professional and a person, I mean, that is definitely something that has happened to me. So it's about how you define it as well.
Totally. I have to throw this up from Steve really quick. Just made me laugh.
Yeah,
You're right, Steve. Here's to 2025. Let's keep it optimistic.
No, Steve, not 2030. I'm going to retire in 2030.
It's the goal. I am curious to hear your thoughts. And we actually had a poll running, which I don't know if what we just shared will change some people's opinions, but I'm curious for folks that can't take that leap to solopreneurship right now, what kind of tips you may have for how they can maybe prepare or start like doing their own research on what to offer or anything. Do you have any tips for people that maybe it's just building your skill set or doing some own, like your own learning?
Yeah.
I'm curious if you have any opinions there.
Yeah, I think, well, I mean, coming back to the money thing again, save your money. So you have a runway. I mean, that actually the advice that people told me after I started, which I didn't do, was you should start warm, don't start cold, which means you've already, figured out kind of what you want to do and you're already out there selling. Maybe you're just doing it on the side. You have people are going to buy from you if you went on your own, or already are, because you're doing it as a side gig. I think a lot of people do this sort of side gig and then kick it up at some point when they decide they can take the leap. Yeah. So I think I did do this a bit as well, like getting started. But there's so much you can do while you're still in house. And unless you want to do something entirely different, you can learn so much in your own environment. Sometimes those jobs, this expression, drinking from the fire hose, that's always how it felt in house. There was so much going on, and every day I could have written an essay at the end of the day about what I learned today. So if you have an idea in mind, just remember, like, whoever your ideal clients are. In my case, except for the coaching, my ideal clients are not researchers, right? So you probably have those ideal clients around you in your workplace right now. And I mean, obviously, probably don't go to them and say, hey, I'm going to leave and start my own company, but you can talk to them and get ideas and use that time to really test it out and figure out what you want to do. So I think I think if it's a long-term goal, there's so much to figure out and really just start planning. I mean, if you want to think about all the things you want to do, are you going to have a website? How are you going to, let people know what you're doing? Do you already have a big base of people who you can just use that network, or do you need to actually reach out? I mean, you can start growing that now, I think. So if it's not a great time, but that doesn't mean you can't start taking the steps if it's something you want to do in the future.
Totally. I think that's excellent advice. And then you still have that cushion of safety if you're a little concerned, which is totally fair. Awesome. I am curious to explore a little bit. I know people are probably curious about pricing, and that is tricky. It's like uncomfortable to put, I think, as well, like a money amount to what you're providing. Like that's kind of scary. And so I'm curious kind of how you approach that. I know it's an ongoing thing for you to discover and research, but what steps are you taking to kind of figure out how to price yourself and how to price research and your offerings?
Yeah, well, I think, we can take the coaching example. So I did work with a business coach last year for a number of months. And that was, of course, the question, like, how much? And I can't remember the source now. It could be the ICF, the International Coaching Federation. They have a sort of a resource where they talk about, like, they have a survey that they ask all their coaches to fill out, and they sort of say how much they charge. So in that case, it was like, okay, I can just kind of price myself along with this. The challenge, I think, again, is if no one has job security where they're saving their money because they think they're going to lose their job, or they just think it's too expensive, you're not going to be able to make the money. So I think for me, it's also having that conversation and talking about it. Like I said, people aren't going to bring up money if you don't. No one wants to talk about money. It's an awkward thing to discuss, even in a sort of discussion with the recruiter. If you're applying for a job, it's always just this moment of like, ooh, the money. So I think you do have to bring it up. But yeah, that kind of thing, kind of figuring out what people are charging, and that I could have gone into a bit deeper, depending, like I said, I'm in flux right now, what I'm going to be offering. So I want to make sure that I'm charging, something that sort of fits. You don't want to be way over what other people are charging, but you also don't want to be way under. And that's the tricky thing. Like I mentioned, I did some pilot coaching, to get to practice what I was actually offering, practice my offering, and also to get hopefully satisfied clients that would leave referrals. But that's free, right? So you have to think about how much are you willing to do for free or at a much reduced rate, and is that going to help you grow your client base, or is that going to give people the impression you're not actually, that great if you're charging so little money? So it's a constant negotiation. What should I charge? And then you have a lot of peers and friends and professional contacts who are like, you need to charge more, and they're like, rallying you, and then it's like, okay, do you want to buy what I'm selling? So yeah, it's tough. I mean, it's a challenge, and I think that's something that drew me to the whole idea of value pricing and solopreneurship too, because once you do, kind of find your in this case service market fit, you can say, I've done my research, I know this is a good price, and if someone's like, that's too expensive, it's like, okay, well, I guess you're not my ideal client, right? But it's getting to that point where you can say, this is how much it costs, and then there's no sort of bargaining or negotiation. That's just what it is. So that's where I hope to get someday.
Yeah. It's an ongoing journey, like you were saying. Yeah. I'm really curious to hear. So knowing that, it's not a good market, it's tough time. Solopreneurship can sometimes be, it can be challenging. How do you gauge your own success? Like, what goals are you setting to kind of feel like, okay, there might not be clear wins, but I'm moving forward? Because I think that'd be really helpful for people who are currently solopreneurs or hoping to be that, and they can't necessarily have the success be like, I have X amount of clients. Like, how do you kind of track that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think something that really brought me down a lot toward the end of last year and the beginning of this year, because I was thinking about success as money. And for me, it's very funny because I never really thought about money when I was an academic. I never even realized until years later that you could negotiate your salary in academia. I didn't even know you could do that. They just said, this is your job. And I was like, great. And then I just got some standard raise every year for being there. And I never even thought about it. So it's very funny, I think, in retrospect, that was like that. This is my measure of success, is how much money I'm making. So I think that's a very dangerous one. It's an important one, right? But it isn't at all just about the money. It's also about the journey. So like I said, at the end of last year, I wrote a newsletter, and I talked about how many LinkedIn followers I had grown, and how many newsletter subscribers I had, and how much I had written, and how many conferences I presented at, that sort of thing. So it's like, what have I done? I have worked. And I think that as I'm talking, I'm coming up with my insight here. The thing is that when you work at a job, you're getting paid every day to be there. You get your paycheck at the end of the month or every 2 weeks or whatever, and everything is paid. And so when you're working on your own, so much of what you do is not paid. And so because the money wasn't coming in like I wanted it to, I felt like I wasn't doing anything. But I am working all the time, right? I'm working a full-time job here. It's just that I don't get paid for that kind of stuff. So I think I reframed that a bit at the end of the year, like, look at what I've done. Look at the friends I've made, the contacts I have, how much I've learned. I think that's a big one. Look at how much I've learned in the last 2 years. That, looking at some of the things I write now, I think I wouldn't even understand this 5 years ago, right? I mean, this is a completely new world for me compared to where I was, when I was an academic or even in-house. So the learning is huge. And I mean, to be honest, that's something I love about life, is learning new things. And if I can decouple that from the money, I think that's important for everyone's sanity. And especially, we're all in this environment where a lot of us are at for-profit companies where it's all about, that's the bottom line. It's how much you make. And then we celebrate or we don't, and the market celebrates or it doesn't. And that's it. But that isn't the only thing by far, especially when you're working on your own.
Totally. Wow. I love so much of that. I wish I could just put your quote up on the screen. But I totally agree. I think that's such an important reframe for, like you said, people on their own and also in-house. And I think something you keep getting at is like, that reflection is so valuable. And kind of seeing like, what are the non-monetary things that I've gained? Like, I love the thought of like looking at, learnings, relationships you've built. And I think that can be valuable for anyone in user research to spend that time. And especially it seems like in-house, that's a great way too, to see what are the things I can offer to someone. Like, look at all these things I've learned, and like that can be super valuable. So I think that's a really great exercise for literally anyone to do. Yeah. I should honestly do it myself. Amazing. So we have 10 more minutes. I'd love to just talk a little bit about the end of your article, kind of the moving forward portion. You talk about wanting to build in public more. I'd love to hear kind of what you mean by that and what you hope you'll gain from that. I know you've kind of talked a little about it, but
sure. So when I first started out, I read about this idea and I thought it sounded really great. And I even put it on my LinkedIn post when I announced that I was going independent. Like, I'm going to be building in public. And I think what happened was, I mean, I have been building in public in the sense that I ask questions that are on my mind and things that I'm wondering about, but it's really hard, as I learned, to build in public when things aren't going the way that you'd hoped, because you think, there's the LinkedIn post where it's like self-promotion. And of course, when you're working on your own, I mean, what are you going to use LinkedIn for? You have to use it a little bit for that. And it's, again, the sales thing always made me a little bit cringy, but it's like you say you're going to launch something, and then what are you going to do? Come back and say, oh, nobody wanted to do it, or I've really not had the, and of course you can do that. You can say, and this is what I'm doing now to change that. But I think it's so easy to slip into this sort of mindset where it's like, I can't share because I don't want people to know that it's not going well. And I think that sort of can spiral. And so it's not easy to say, this is what I'm going to try. And I'm doing it now. I'm having these arguments in my head even today, like, no, you should write about that. That is something you want to do. Oh, but I don't know. Do I want to put it out there? And that can be scary. So it's kind of exhausting to constantly be putting stuff up that exhausts you and scares you. But I think it's that when I have been transparent, I've gotten such a warm response and comments from people both publicly and privately, like, thank you so much. And this is something I'm struggling with. And that gives me so much energy and makes me so happy to think that if I can be transparent and vulnerable, people are also feeling this way. It's not just me. And can we actually share our struggles as well, instead of just saying, I've been promoted and things are going so great. And like you said, I made $10,000 in a month less, So it's important to put that stuff up there too, because we're all going through those. So that's my goal, to start doing that more, like really clearly about my business, not just asking the questions, but also saying, this is what I'm working on. So now I'm sitting here on a live stream saying this, so I better start doing it pretty soon.
We're all going to check you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. But I think it's good for me to keep the momentum going too, because that's another thing when you're alone. If you're having a hard time, it's very easy to just stop. And I did that for a while. I can't do this. No one's there to motivate me. I'm just going to kind of go into my shell and sulk. Or, as I wrote in my newsletter yesterday, be in this fallow state and not do anything. There's no one there to say, get up, come on, what are you going to do today? Yeah. So I think it helps with that too.
Totally. No, I love that. And I think there's so much value to be had in that transparency. And I think LinkedIn can feel kind of toxic sometimes and just full of like unrealistic, like everyone's just sharing the good stuff. And so I really appreciate a post I've seen like yours that are very honest. And I think that's how we can all grow and actually like learn, is being honest and also hearing like, oh, I'm not alone. Janelle's feeling this too. Or like, oh, like someone else is thinking this. And I think even in-house folks, like with remote work, we all kind of feel slightly isolated and alone. And that like that chance to resonate with others and really see like, okay, like, especially too, I think in user research, there's lots of teams of one. There's lots of just small teams where you're like, am I crazy? Am I the only one feeling this? And so I think it's awesome. And I wish more people would, and I'm talking to myself as well. I definitely don't share super realistic posts all the time, but I think there's a lot to be had for that sort of thing. Awesome. I know you shared a lot of advice, but I'm curious if you have like someone comes to you, they're like, hey, Janelle, even with the bad market, I still want to be a solopreneur. What would be like your best advice you'd give, or your first advice you'd share with someone?
Yeah, my first advice is save your money. So that is the one thing I did right. I think maybe it's from my years of being a starving graduate student. I mean, this is another lesson, right? Like, learn how to budget. I have never budgeted because my budget is spend as little as possible. That's always how I've lived, because I was in like the poverty zone as a graduate student for so many years. So I just saved and saved and saved my money, because what am I going to spend my money on? You know, I had no money. So now this money is just going into the bank account. And believe me, I've needed it. And people say, how can you make it if you're not making that much money? It's like, I had so much savings. I was way beyond the emergency fund level. So save your money. I would say that is absolutely essential. Or if you have a partner or you have another way of making money, have the conversation. Don't just assume, oh, hey, it's going to go great. Everything will be fine. I'll be back up to I thought, because people would say, oh, you're going to make a fortune. You're going to be making double what you made in house in like 3 months, and if I would have been counting on that, it would have been trouble. But save your money. Make sure you have, because that is so stressful. It is a huge shift to suddenly not get a paycheck anymore. And it's like, oh, my paycheck is coming from my money. I'm paying myself. So that I think is absolutely number one advice before anything, strategic, or figuring out what you want to do, and figuring out if there's a market there, and figuring out if you are going to be able to work on your own well. Is that something that is good for you, or do you prefer to be in-house? It's totally fine to be in-house too, if that works better for you. But yeah, that's it in 3 words: save your money.
And that's great advice. And I love the point you just made too, of like, is a solopreneur environment even conducive to you? I think a lot of people don't even, like, it's hard to imagine that, like, being in-house, you're like, oh, would I actually thrive not having a boss, not having someone to like keep you motivated? Like, that's totally like something to think about that I hadn't necessarily thought of until you just said that.
Yeah.
I'm gonna
I was just gonna say, you made a great point too, that it isn't just solopreneurs, it's people working remotely, and it's people who are teams of one. I mean, of course, people can feel very isolated even if they're in-house. So
totally,
maybe that's a good test to see if you would like solopreneurs.
Yeah. Can you thrive remote? Yeah, and I think too, with a lot of what you're saying too, is just there's a lot of introspection, like almost doing user research on yourself of like, what do I like? Does this work? Like, do I feel confident about this? Like, what are my skills? And that can be really hard work and really uncomfortable. And I think it's easy to avoid that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I am curious in the last couple minutes as well. Again, I know we have in-house folks or people that are, maybe want to be solopreneurs but staying in-house. Do you feel like, if you're looking back at in-house Janelle, knowing what you've learned from being a solopreneur, is there anything you wish you could give to in-house researcher Janelle from what you've learned? Like, do you think there's been any great lessons you've learned as a solopreneur that can be really helpful to in-house researchers?
Yeah, that's a good question. I could write a whole article on that, I think. I think the thing that comes to mind is just that, they say, like, you don't know what you don't know. And I know now what I don't know about business. Let's put it like that. I understand. I remember my first in-house job, where in the onboarding, they got up and like explained this whole like sales, pre-sales, all the way to customer success. And this was all completely, foreign to me. And I didn't really, I understood it, but I didn't. I had to learn. And I know a lot of people aren't coming from that background, but I think if you're in your specialization, it's easy to stay there and talk to people in that, and view everyone else as kind of, oh, they have their own thing. But we're actually all in it together. And when you're a solopreneur, you're all of those things in the same person, right? So you have to kind of do it all. So I think it's really taught me to respect and just appreciate every role in a company, because they're all there for a reason, and I can learn from them. And if I ever did go back in house, I think I would be, knocking on everyone's door all the time and annoying them with questions, because I'm just so interested in how it all works. So I think that's a piece of advice. Totally.
No, that's great advice. And I think user researchers are in some ways perfect for solopreneurs, because so curious. You have to ask lots of questions. You have to learn a lot. And that just seems like so conducive. Amazing. Well, we are at time. Janelle, this has been so great. I really, really appreciate honesty, your willingness to share your experience. I think it's resonated with a lot of folks. Feel free to find Janelle on LinkedIn. We'll send an email after with her Substack, her Medium. Definitely keep in touch and keep her honest on her goals for writing. But seriously, Janelle, thank you so much. This has been really wonderful. And thank you everyone who joined and shared your thoughts as well in the chat. Hope everyone has a wonderful rest of your day.
Thanks a lot, Lauren.
Thanks.